Okay, now with the number 4 brush, I'm going to clean the green off it, and I'm going to mix a real rich dark brown with burnt sienna and ultramarine. Plenty of it and nice and thick. You don't want a lot of water in this. It's got to be a fairly strong paint. And then with the number 4 brush, there's this little doorway here that's blocked in, so there's no light coming through it. So this is why I want this really dense dark brown, which is almost black. Get that in. That gives us a real good contrast, a real good light against dark. With the number 2 brush, I'm now getting some raw sienna and burnt sienna for the stonework and just softening that in at that edge. So there's like a little glimpse of reflected light. Still with the number 2 brush, there's some areas here where there's some quite dark colours running down that edge. Just underneath the top of the window there, I'm bringing that down. Underneath the lintel there and there. Maybe a few little details. There's a little gap in the wall here that's quite dark. There's quite a bit more dark on this side, so now that it's thoroughly dry I can just explore that a bit more, but all the time bearing in mind the perspective. Then on this corner, a few darks into there. And then up at the top here where it's quite dark, too wet earlier, but I can now just put a touch of detail into that as well. Okay, so we'll leave that to dry before we put some shadow on it. So I've now got a number 8 brush and I'm going to mix some shadow colour. I'm taking ultramarine blue and adding a bit of rose madder. Got to have plenty of this. Very important with shadows as well that they are transparent. You should be able to see the colour underneath them. The light's coming from the right, so we'll start with the right hand wall and just a thin wash of shadow. Plenty of water with your colour. I can make the shadow a little bit patchy so that it doesn't cover all the stone completely, and it's nice to get that bit of purple with the orangey colours behind it because they're contrasts. This is going to cast a touch of shadow across there, bringing it right down to the ground. And I think for a hint of reflected light I'm going to take a bit of raw sienna and burnt sienna and drop that in round the bottom of it. Touch more shadow colour to blend it in. And before we just complete the shadows, I need to leave that to dry. Inevitably, the shadow has washed a little bit of my detail away. So very quickly, I'm just going to take a little bit of raw sienna and burnt sienna and the 1/4 inch flat brush and just put a few of these stones back in. And then with the number 2 brush and that dark mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, reinstate this corner here with a broken line all the way down that edge and a few stones coming out from it. And then straight away going back to the shadow colour, the ultramarine and rose madder. I've strengthened it a bit. And we need to come all the way down this edge with it with the number 8 brush, really stressing that corner, bringing it right down into there. So that is darker than the shadow behind it, bringing it further forward. And we'll add a bit of raw sienna and burnt sienna into it while it's still wet. Bring out a few little darks, very point of the brush just to emphasize those. and we'll leave that to dry before finally putting in some foreground. So while that shadow was drying, I've just mixed up some colours to put a loose foreground in. I don't want to put too much emphasis on the foreground so that the focal point is still the ruined building. And before I drop these colours in, I'm just taking a number 10 brush with clean water on it, and I'm just wetting all the bottom of the stonework so that these next colours will creep up into it. So I'm going to start still with the number 12 brush and some lemon yellow to put a few bits of bright colour in to look like grass creeping around the bottom of it. Now that looks a bit strong, a bit acid at first, but it's a good bright colour to look like a bit of sunlight before I add a richer darker green, which is a mixture of Oriolin, cobalt blue and a little bit of raw sienna. Bring that in over there. Bringing that right down. A little bit of raw sienna and burnt sienna as well to break up the green so it's not too much of a mass of greenery. Dropping that in. And I want to get the darkest colour right at the foreground, and this is the dark green mixture that I used for the ivy, which is Oriolin, ultramarine and burnt sienna. Bringing that right into the bottom so the darkest tone is right at the front. I'm deliberately playing down this background so that the emphasis is on the building itself. And I just need to clean the number 10 brush, put a bit more water into there to conduct the paint up the wall. I'm just going to take a bit more of the shadow colour. This is the ultramarine blue and rose madder, and I'm adding a touch of burnt sienna to it as well, and we'll get a bit of dark into there to represent the shadow inside. Creeping it up into the wall, and then with clean water blending that in. And just so that that dark colour I put in doesn't spread too far, I'm lifting a bit off with a damp clean brush, the number 10 again, and we'll put a bit of light into there with some lemon yellow to give us a bit more grass. And that lemon yellow is almost opaque, and yet when it gets the dark colour behind it, it goes a bright green. Okay, we'll call that one finished. I think the main element to this one is the contrast of light against dark. Look at the brightly coloured stonework compared to the dark recesses, and the light greens against the dark greens in the foliage and grasses. Also, look how I've taken the opportunity to use a purple shadow against the bright orangey coloured stonework. These colours are complementary, and if you can find a way to use these in a painting, it will always give it a lift.
Now available on DVD. Try these techniques yourself at home whenever you wish. Today's workshop is now available to order on DVD from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.